In the fall of 1995, a serial killer was on the loose. Crossing the country, he lured women with his charm and then struck. Each time, he vanished before police could catch him. The FBI and police detectives needed to stop him before another victim met this deadly stranger.
The body of a young woman found burned in a truck launched a manhunt to find her killer. When more bodies began to turn up across the country, the FBI believed the cases were linked. Investigators had a suspect. They just couldn't find him. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. Agents would enlist the help of local law enforcement and even long-haul truckers to stop a cross-country killer.
In the early morning hours of September 29, 1995, the Los Angeles Fire Department responded to a vehicle fire at a hospital in Van Nuys. They found a pickup truck burning in the parking lot. When the flames were extinguished, they found human remains. Firemen contacted the Arson and Homicide Division of the Los Angeles Police Department. Homicide detectives responded to the scene and were briefed by uniformed officers already there. They questioned a witness, a nurse who had seen the fire start. She said she had arrived for work before dawn for the early morning shift. In the parking lot, she saw the truck go ablaze. She saw the outline of a figure with long hair run from the truck as the flames erupted. She never saw a face. And she had never seen the truck before. Investigators inspected the vehicle. The pattern of fire damage indicated it had begun in the cab and had burned very quickly. Investigators believed it had been intentionally set. An accelerant had been used, probably gasoline. The body inside appeared to be a female, but it was burned beyond recognition. Some items survived the fire, including a backpack, a camera, and a roll of undeveloped film. Technicians recovered several documents that bore the name Sandra Gallagher. By sunrise, detectives at LAPD's Van Nuys station had run the truck's plates.
Okay, I'll call back.
Through DMV records, Detective Mike Koblenz was able to confirm that Sandra Gallagher owned the truck.
We'd done some work at the office and learned that she was in fact married to an individual, Steve, who lived in the Los Angeles area. We attempted to contact him and made arrangements to interview him at Van Nuys Station.
Detectives suspected it was Sandra in the truck, but identification through dental records would take a few days.
Thank you. I have some things I'd like you to look at. See if you can tell me if they recognize.
Since the body was too damaged to identify, detectives asked Stephen Gallagher to look through the recovered evidence.
You recognize this person?
He said the backpack, camera, and other items were Sandra's. The police department had developed a roll of film which survived the fire.
Wife and somebody.
Stephen identified his wife in the pictures. Most married homicide victims are killed by their husbands.
Well, we were having a few problems. But
Detectives asked Stephen about his relationship with Sandra.
There's a lot of domestic violence, spousal abuse that goes on, so it's just a direction to go to initially. In our case, as it related to Sandra Gallagher, once again, we wanted to eliminate the husband as a suspect and determine a little bit more about our victim, Sandra.
Stephen said he had seen his wife on September 28th, the day before the truck fire.
Exciting's been happening. What about you?
60 hours.
That day, the couple had met for lunch.
My brother may be getting a promotion. He's gonna get
He
a
and
promotion.
Sandra were experiencing marital problems, and they had spent the last couple of nights apart.
He should know, I would say, week after next.
They had talked about reconciling,
Who was that guy I saw at the bar with the other night? The big guy in the leather jacket?
but things were still strained between them.
That's none of your business, okay?
Stephen told detectives he last saw Sandra around 2 p.m., though he heard from his wife later that evening.
He split apart for a bit. Still trying to work.
He said Sandra called him from a local bar called McRed's.
I know.
She was very excited and told him she had won $1,200 in the lottery.
I was over my brother's.
Since that call, Stephen hadn't heard from his wife and had no idea where she had gone.
There were a few other people.
Detectives had to corroborate his story.
Once she mentioned the bar McRed's, that was our direction. We wanted to get in there, find out who was the bartender, who the owner was, who was there that particular evening, and who could identify some photos of Sandra that we'd gathered from the truck.
LAPD detectives visited the bar. When shown a photo of Sandra Gallagher, the bartender recognized the woman.
Okay. What can you tell me about it?
She knew her by her nickname, Sam.
Had a lottery ticket. Hey. Guess what?
The bartender confirmed that Sandra had been in the bar on the night of the 28th. She had told everyone about her lottery win.
Yeah.
Some customers overheard the detectives' questions and said they had also been in McRed's that
Can
evening.
you tell me about her when she was in here the other night?
They also remembered Sandra and recalled one man who talked with her that night.
These people in the bar had mentioned to us that they recognized the photographs, and they identified the photographs as a female by the name of Sam. This is the name that they knew her by, was Sam. And everybody had mentioned she was with a person by the name of Glenn.
Yeah.
They described Glenn as having long blonde hair and a beard. He'd been coming in regularly for the past few days. That night, he seemed interested in Sandra and talked to her for quite a while.
Okay.
Glenn was friendly and came across as a big spender, buying drinks for Sandra and the others.
Yeah.
When the bar closed, Glenn had asked Sandra for a ride home.
That's a big hit. I think we gotta get out of here.
He said he lived nearby.
Let's do it.
She agreed to drop him off, and they left together. The customers hadn't seen Glenn since that night.
Yeah, she took him home.
Do you know where he lives?
It was about 5 minutes.
They believed Glenn's last name was Rogers, but they weren't sure.
Or what time did
Their description of him matched the one of the man seen fleeing the burning truck.
If you think of anything else, please call me.
Detective Koblenz would check the lead.
For your help. Thank you.
Through department sources, we're able to identify Glenn Rogers as a resident in the Van Nuys area. And we're able to obtain photographs of Mr. Rogers. These photographs, in the next day or two, were shown to various witnesses at the bar in the form of a photo lineup, and Mr. Rogers was identified in this photo lineup as the person being at McRed's with Sandra Gallagher.
Detectives secured a search warrant for Rogers' apartment. It was only a few minutes away from where the truck had been burned.
LAPD, search warrant.
They didn't know if Rogers was inside, perhaps with a weapon. Uniformed officers entered first to clear the apartment. Rogers wasn't there. It looked like Rogers had cleared out in a hurry. Detectives recovered a purse and a woman's wallet. It was empty of cash and held no ID.
No identification.
They also found a woman's earring.
The earring became significant in that her husband, Steve Gallagher, identified that earring as one that he had purchased as a pair for his wife a couple months earlier.
After several days, the coroner made his report. He positively identified the remains from the truck as those of Sandra Gallagher. He determined that she had not burned to death.
We learned in the nose area of our victim there wasn't any presence of evidence of fire, sooting, and so on. That gave us information that because she didn't breathe any of the fire, any of the soot, it gave us an indication that she had died prior to the fire itself.
The mother of three had been killed by manual strangulation. Los Angeles detectives charged Glenn Rogers with Sandra Gallagher's murder and issued a warrant for his arrest. They entered Rogers' name and description into the NCIC, the National Crime Information Center, a database that links over 57,000 law enforcement agencies nationwide.
That informs other agencies around the United States that Glenn Rogers, in this case, is in fact wanted in Los Angeles for murder. It would list the agency, Los Angeles Police Department, Van Nuys area, with my name and my phone number. If they have any contact with Glenn Rogers and happen to run him, this warrant would show up in their jurisdiction and he'd be taken into custody.
Detectives sought out anyone who knew Glenn Rogers. They learned he frequented local bars and worked odd jobs, mostly in construction. They visited several job sites, interviewing his friends and co-workers.
Through witnesses and friends, we learned that Glenn did have a temper, and that when he drank, he did become enraged. There was domestic violence involved with former girlfriends. So we knew we were dealing with someone who could become violent, and generally violent when he drank, as it was in our case with Sandra Gallagher.
One of his friends said he hadn't seen Rogers in a while, but promised to contact the police if he heard from him.
Okay.
A few days later, Rogers' friend called. He said Rogers had phoned him from a motel outside Jackson, Mississippi. Local police talked to the motel manager, who told them Rogers' room number.
Police, open up!
The room was empty. The murder suspect was on the run. In the fall of 1995, the search continued for Glenn Rogers. Police believed he fled California after killing a woman there on September 28th. A tip led to a Mississippi motel, but Rogers had disappeared before police arrived.
No, he's not here.
Police issued an APB locally. They hoped someone would spot the suspected killer before he left the area. Days later, on November 3rd, 1995, Jackson, Mississippi detectives responded to a murder. Family members had found Linda Price dead in her bathtub. The 34-year-old single mother had been stabbed repeatedly and her throat had been slashed. Investigators searched the apartment for evidence. Technicians photographed the scene and lifted numerous latent fingerprints. They found no murder weapon. No valuables seemed to be missing. There was no apparent forced entry, and the killer had locked the door when leaving. The details of the crime scene led Jackson homicide detectives to conclude Linda Price had been killed by someone she knew. In the morning, they interviewed her mother. Perhaps she knew the killer as well. She said her daughter had a new boyfriend. His name was Glenn Rogers. A month earlier, on October 3rd, Linda had met Rogers at the Mississippi State Fair where he had been working. He was charming, and Linda fell for him right away.
That's pretty close, huh?
They soon rented an apartment and moved in together. At first, Linda seemed happier than ever, but recently she wondered if she'd made a mistake. She told her mother that Rogers had a bad temper and she feared his mood swings. When Linda stopped calling and didn't answer her apartment door, her mother believed that Rogers had harmed her. Again, Rogers was nowhere to be found. Jackson detectives believed he had left the area. They entered his name into the NCIC database. Learning Rogers was wanted for murder in California, they contacted Detective Mike Koblenz in Los Angeles.
Jackson, Mississippi at that time contacted me, informed me of a murder they had, and they wanted more information on Glenn Rogers as he was a possible perpetrator in that case.
The murders followed a pattern. The victims in California and Mississippi had both been charmed by Rogers. They had been isolated from others, then brutally killed just before Rogers fled the area. The investigators believed that Rogers was on a rampage that probably would not stop until he was found.
In our minds, we knew that we had a major problem going on here. We felt if he wasn't apprehended, that there could very well be more victims.
Jackson police asked the public to call if anyone saw Rogers in the area. Witnesses reported sightings, but Rogers stayed one step ahead of authorities. The detectives contacted the FBI field office in Jackson.
Hey.
Got together these pictures from the crime scene. I think you're gonna find
They believed Rogers had left the state like he did after the California killing. Agents filed a federal warrant for unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. Perhaps federal resources could help stop the killer. FBI Special Agent John Huber helped coordinate the multi-state investigation.
This case was very high speed, very fast. The murder he committed in Jackson was on November 3rd, was Linda Price. Subsequent to that, he committed another murder on November 6th.
On that date, police in Tampa, Florida responded to a murder scene at a local motel room that had been rented by Glenn Rogers. Like Linda Price, the young woman lay dead in the bathtub, stabbed in the back, chest, and wrist. There was no ID of the woman in the room, but investigators noted a tattoo of a cross on her shoulder. Her jeans and shoes were piled near the toilet. A bracelet was found in the sink. From the evidence left behind, Tampa homicide detective Julie Masucci attempted to piece together the details of the murder.
When we removed the clothing, it appeared that she had been stabbed through the clothing, which means that she was never undressed. And it was from the rear portion, which appeared that someone might have come up behind her and stabbed her.
The shoes had blood spots on the top, indicating she had them on and was standing when she was attacked. Under her body was a man's watch. Investigators believed it belonged to the killer.
It was significant that she was placed in a bathtub and that it appeared that someone tried to clean up any evidence that they left behind. We had found towels to indicate someone had wiped up blood off of a floor. It appeared that the bathtub water had been run to try and clean up any evidence that was left behind.
The detective interviewed the housekeeper who discovered the body. That morning, she had been making her daily rounds just after checkout time. Outside room 119, she spotted a handwritten "Do Not Disturb" sign.
Housekeeping!
She said she didn't clean the room the day before because she saw the sign and wanted to respect the privacy of the people staying there. On this day, the occupants were scheduled to have checked out. When she entered the bathroom, she made the gruesome discovery. Detectives asked the motel manager if she knew about the people staying in room 119. She recalled the man who rented the room because he requested a "Do Not Disturb" sign the day before.
They told him he didn't have one. So he paid for another night and told them at the registration that he did not want them cleaning his room. He wanted it to be left alone. Apparently he went back to the room and tore off a piece of a phone book and made his own "Do Not Disturb" sign, and he hung it on the door.
The motel manager remembered the same man packing up a small white car that evening. He had paid for another night, so she didn't think he was leaving. She warned him about recent break-ins at the motel and told him not to leave anything in the car overnight.
Thanks. Good, I'll go.
The detectives checked the office records, finding the registration card for room 119. It had Glenn Rogers' name and signature on it. Technicians would later recover prints matching Rogers from the card. Detective Masucci ran a computer check and saw the California and Mississippi murder warrants. She contacted the other agencies and the FBI.
Then we started to realize very quickly into the investigation that there was a possibility that this man, Mr. Glenn Rogers, was a serial killer.
The investigators knew who the killer was, but Tampa detectives still had not identified the female victim. She remained at the morgue as Jane Doe. If they could identify her, it might help them find the man who had killed her and at least 2 others. In the fall of 1995, after linking murders in California, Mississippi, and Florida to one man, the FBI and local detectives searched for accused serial killer Glenn Rogers. The latest victim had been found in a Tampa motel room. She was still unidentified. Responding to media coverage, a woman whose daughter had been missing for 2 days came forward. She positively identified the body of her daughter, Tina Marie Cribbs. Tina had 2 children of her own. Tina's mother told Detective Julie Masucci about her daughter's last day.
We learned that Tina had worked and that she went to the Showtime bar, which is in Gibsonton, and she met some friends there. She was supposed to meet her mother there. Apparently it's like a family bar where a lot of people go, and there's televisions in there, and they just go and gather and talk.
Detectives visited the Showtime bar. The bartender said she knew Tina and her mother. She confirmed that Tina had been in the bar on November 5th. The bartender also remembered that a man named Glenn was there the same night.
How you nice ladies doing?
He talked with Tina and the others.
Let me do it for you, let a good time roll. So you want bartender?
He bought a round of drinks with a $100 bill. The bartender said the man was very friendly and won Tina over quickly.
She started talking to a gentleman that was...
Eventually, he asked Tina for a ride home. He said his motel room was close and promised Tina would be back in time to meet her mother.
Everything's taken care of, right? All right, great, thanks.
Tina finally agreed and told the others she'd be right back.
When the mother came to the Showtime bar, she sat there and waited, and her daughter didn't show up. So she said she started beeping her to find out where she was. And she said that she had such a close-knit relationship with her daughter that she immediately knew something was wrong when she didn't answer her pages.
Detective Masucci also learned that Tina owned a white Ford Festiva, the same kind of car the Tampa motel manager had seen Rogers packing with suitcases. She updated the NCIC report on Rogers, adding the Festiva and its license plate number to the fugitive's information. FBI Special Agent John Huber was surprised that Rogers wasn't trying to conceal himself.
Glenn Rogers seemed to not care if he would get caught or had no fear of the law. He would always use his real name when dealing with people and checking into motels. He would drive cars that weren't stolen, either belonged to the victim, which he could easily be linked to, or his own vehicle. He didn't seem to care. If people knew what was happening, he wasn't trying to hide.
The search for the serial killer hit the news. TV stations across the Southeast broadcast pictures of Rogers, asking anyone spotting him to call authorities. Hundreds of leads poured into the FBI. One promising tip came from a Jackson, Mississippi motel. 2 separate callers claimed to have seen Rogers there. Rogers had been in Jackson previously and was known to frequent small motels.
We set up a perimeter around the hotel, and then we had an entry team go up to the door.
Police, come to the door! Come to the door with your hands up! Come to the door! Hands where we can see you! Take your hands off! Hands off!
Agents were cautious until they could identify the man.
Put that on the wall! Where is it? Hands on the wall.
We identified the person that resembled Rogers and determined that it was not him. We then later searched the entire hotel and began searching the hotels in the immediate vicinity but didn't find him. It was very important in this case to apprehend this individual as soon as possible, because based on his history, he was going to continue to kill until he was apprehended.
Authorities were desperate to stop him. The serial killer was out there somewhere, and it was likely that he was searching for his next victim. In the fall of 1995, suspected serial killer Glenn Rogers had been last seen in Florida. The FBI believed he had murdered a woman there after killing women in California and Mississippi. The FBI soon learned that Louisiana had been his next stop. On November 10, 1995, Andy Sutton, a mother of 4, was found murdered in her Bossier City, Louisiana apartment.
Bruises on her legs.
Like 2 others, she had multiple stab wounds to her upper body and back. The Bossier City detective questioned the victim's roommate and former boyfriend.
9 o'clock.
Andy's roommate was a waitress and had worked late the night before Andy was killed.
Went in together.
When she returned home in the early morning hours, she heard the bedroom door close. She assumed it was Andy and her new boyfriend, Glenn Rogers, in the apartment's 1-bedroom. Blankets had been left on the couch, and so she slept there. After daybreak, she was awakened by someone at the apartment door.
Would you tell Andy I'm here?
It was Andy's ex-boyfriend.
No, I'm sorry. I'm here now. I'd like to see Andy.
He wanted to talk to Andy.
I don't care. I'd still like to see him.
Stay there. Andy? Andy?
In the room, she found Andy's body under the sheet. She told detectives Andy had met Glenn Rogers in a bar. They had been dating for only a few days. Neighbors had seen Rogers leave in a white Festiva. Bossier City detectives ran Rogers' name through the NCIC and saw the 3 other murder warrants. They contacted the other police agencies and the FBI.
Hey, detective. Here's that fax report.
Los Angeles faxed a photo of Rogers to be used in the local investigation. Louisiana television stations picked up the story. Viewers were asked to be on the lookout for Rogers, but they were warned not to approach the deadly fugitive. Special Agent John Huber and the other investigators were frustrated.
Yeah, you know it.
Rogers was killing people faster than we could investigate where he was. It was just a kind of a time game, and he was killing people faster than we could apprehend him.
Hey guys, look at
The FBI and local detectives believed Rogers murdered 4 women in 6 weeks. After each killing, Rogers had fled the state.
Let's try to focus.
The locations he chose were random.
Let's try to focus in. Let's try to focus in over here.
Despite their best efforts, investigators couldn't keep up. They needed to spread the description of Rogers and his vehicle across the country.
Let's start off with that.
Agents sent requests to truckers over their CBs to be on the lookout for a white Ford Festiva. They posted wanted flyers in truck stops and rest areas.
We're not really sure where he's going to be going next. That's why
They held press
below here is
conferences to get
photograph
Rogers' photo
of
out to the public.
And Gallagher passed some of this out.
They wanted to warn
Right now,
potential
what we do know
victims
is,
and hoped someone would spot the
that
killer.
we
Through the media, agents released details of Rogers' MO for finding victims and the route he traveled.
Gallagher was viciously raped and murdered.
The FBI began the process of adding Rogers to their 10 most wanted list.
1996. At the rear of a convalescent.
Getting someone on the 10 most wanted list increases the amount of resources that the Bureau puts into a case. It also increases the amount of media attention that's also worked into a case.
The tips began to increase. One caller claimed Glenn Rogers was at a pool hall in Mississippi. 2 agents responded. One of the pitfalls of an intense media campaign are the many false sightings that well-intentioned citizens call in.
Well, gentlemen, Special Agent Huber.
The man in the bar was obviously not Rogers.
What's going on here? You have ID?
The investigators tried to predict Rogers' next move and focus their search. Special Agent Huber had worked plenty of fugitive cases.
A lot of times in fugitive investigations, when people are in trouble, they'll go to areas that they're familiar with, or associates or friends. In this particular case, Rogers' family and friends were mostly located in the Kentucky area, and that's where a lot of our resources were focused.
Authorities in Kentucky received priority teletypes about the fugitive. Kentucky State Police Detective Bob Stevens was already familiar with the name Glenn Rogers. In fact, he'd been looking for him for almost 2 years. Rogers was wanted for questioning in the disappearance and possible murder of his housemate, 71-year-old Mark Peters. Almost 2 years before Glenn Rogers' cross-country crime spree began, his brother had called the Kentucky State Police.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here.
The body had been found inside his family's cabin.
No, I have not.
Police believed it was Mark Peters. Peters had last been seen with Rogers. The cord tied around the corpse's hands and feet matched one found in the home the men shared. Authorities could not determine the cause of death, and they couldn't find Rogers.
1029 on its plate. The case is still ongoing and still pending. We had one suspect, which was Glenn Rogers. We weren't able to track Rogers real well due to the fact that he traveled by Greyhound bus, by tractor trailer, cars. It was hard for us to track him. So we had a hard time trying to know where his next step was.
Still, the investigative focus in Kentucky paid off. On November 13th, 1995, Glenn Rogers visited one of his relatives in Lee County, Kentucky. When he left, she called the Kentucky State Police.
Hi, I think you're looking for my nephew. Glenn Rogers.
She said he was driving a small white car heading west toward Interstate 75. When Detective Stevens heard that Rogers was sighted nearby, he set up on the road he believed Rogers would take to I-75. It wasn't long before a white Ford Festiva drove by. The detective began following.
I wanted to make sure that this was Glenn Rogers, not somebody else that I had actually followed in behind. So I pulled out behind this car. When I ran the car tags actually came back stolen. So I began to follow him. I was able to pull up beside him like I was going to pass him. When I looked over, I could see who it was, and the picture I had of Glenn Rogers matched the driver.
The detective requested backup. A local police officer was parked nearby. He joined the slow pursuit. They followed Rogers for a distance.
I think he was kind of watching me, and I was watching him. And I think by then he must have pretty much figured out that he had a police officer behind him. So we pulled up to a stoplight, and he ran the stoplight, and pretty much ran some people off the road as he was going through the stoplight. I fell in behind him at that time and activated my emergency equipment.
Rogers didn't stop. He sped up.
He's on to us now. Stand by.
Several miles ahead, police set up a roadblock and tried to clear the road of traffic. They hoped this would be the last stop for the elusive killer. On November 13th, 1995, Kentucky State Police set up a roadblock in an effort to apprehend suspected serial killer Glenn Rogers. Armed officers waited at the roadblock.
Shoot his tires! Shoot his tires!
They fired at his tires, but they didn't stop the killer. Detective Bob Stevens was close behind.
We followed him down the road. He had run several cars off the highway, ran a school bus off the highway. He was driving on the wrong side of the highway. And so it was determined that he had to be stopped. Sergeant Barnes was able to get up the other side of him, and when he came back, he tapped him, spun him out of the highway, off the highway into a ditch.
They didn't know if the fugitive was armed.
When I first approached the car, and I was one of the first ones to approach the car, you could see that he looked very upset, very aggravated that he was in the custody. He was very defiant and just didn't want to be taken into custody at that time.
After a 2-month killing spree that spanned the country and left 4 women dead, Glenn Rogers was finally in custody. The vehicle identification number of the white Festiva confirmed the car belonged to Tina Marie Cribbs, the victim in Florida. Technicians scoured the car for evidence. They found shorts with blood on them, a blanket, and a woman's purse. These and other items linked Rogers to the murders in Mississippi, Louisiana, and Florida.
Tell me a little bit about what you guys have.
The FBI served as the clearinghouse for the evidence. FBI agents and detectives from 5 states met in Kentucky to outline the case. Special Agent John Huber helped plan the meeting.
What they did do was put together all the information that everyone had, share information, and also that the FBI laboratory would process all the evidence in this case so that one agency would have custody of all the evidence and do the analysis.
Agents and detectives agreed that their best case against Rogers was in Florida. Tampa detective Julie Masucci met with detectives and prosecutors to review the evidence. They believe the watch found in the tub with the victim belonged to Rogers. A photograph of Rogers with Mississippi victim Linda Price revealed he wore that type of watch. Detective Masucci was confident in her case due to the physical evidence implicating Rogers.
We had Tina Cribbs' car that he was apprehended in. We had some shorts that belonged to him that had some of Tina Cribb's DNA on them, the registration slip that Mr. Rogers signed himself, fingerprints that were found inside of motel room number 119, where the victim was found, and miscellaneous items that were found inside of the car when he was apprehended.
On July 11th, 1997, almost 2 years after the murder of Tina Marie Cribbs in a Tampa motel room, Glenn Rogers was convicted of first-degree murder and later sentenced to death in Florida. 2 years later, Rogers was extradited to Los Angeles to stand trial for the strangulation death of Sandra Gallagher, whose body was burned in a truck fire.
She poured over the victim's body and in the cab of the truck. He was seen.
Prosecutors outlined the victim's final hours for the jury. They showed that Sandra and Glenn Rogers left McRed's bar together on September 28, 1995. At some point, there was a struggle, perhaps as Rogers made an unwanted sexual advance. He strangled her, crushing her windpipe. Attempting to destroy evidence, Rogers doused Sandra's body in the truck with gasoline and set it ablaze. Then he ran. On July 16, 1999, a jury again found Glenn Rogers guilty of murder. He was sentenced to a second death penalty in the state of California. Los Angeles detective Mike Koblenz was impressed by the nationwide partnership of everyone involved in the hunt for Rogers.
That's really what made this case come together, was the interagency cooperation, and not just in Los Angeles, but in Jackson, Mississippi, Tampa, Florida, and later Bossier City, Louisiana, the FBI, the press, the different news agencies that were able to get the information out. We truly worked together on this, and it came to a successful conclusion down the road.
Since Glenn Rogers already had 2 death sentences, Louisiana and Mississippi prosecutors decided to spare the families of the victims emotional trials. Glenn Rogers left at least 11 children without mothers. The importance of stopping him was clear to Detective Julie Masucci and the other investigators.
As a woman, not as a detective, not as a police officer, but as a female, I think that there should be a lot of women that feel safe that he's off of the streets. He had no regard for human life. He had no regard for the feelings of the families that are left behind. He didn't care. And I'm happy that he's behind bars. And I'm happy that he'll never step foot outside of a prison system that he could put other females at risk.
Investigators suspect Rogers is responsible for more unsolved murders. He told family members during his rampage that he had killed dozens. Authorities continue to pursue those unsolved murders to close the cases that can be linked to Glenn Rogers.
Get on your knees, get on your knees.
In South Carolina, a family is taken hostage as part of a brazen bank robbery. Police track down the suspects, but they can't seem to keep the leader in jail. The FBI and police in 4 states are determined to stop him, but the armed fugitive is relentless in his struggle to stay free.
When a bank teller arrived at her parents' home, the gunmen were already there. The robbers held her family hostage and forced her to empty a bank vault. If she didn't comply, she could lose everyone she loved. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. Even when authorities caught the crime's mastermind, they couldn't hold him. Soon he was back in action, with the FBI once again on his trail.
The Savannah River marks the state line separating Augusta, Georgia, from North Augusta, South Carolina. On the South Carolina side, on a Friday afternoon in October 1995, Parker and Brenda Shaw returned home with their granddaughter, Brianna. They watched Brianna on Friday afternoons when her mother, Amy Shaw, worked late as a bank teller. Parker tried to open the garage, but the remote door opener wasn't working.
I'll open the door and you guys can come in, okay? All right.
Not knowing someone was there, he went in the house to open the garage from inside.
Shut the door. Shut the door. Get down there. All right.
The two intruders quickly bound Parker with duct tape,
Put your hands up front of you. That's good.
then forced him into the bedroom. Outside, Brenda got tired of waiting. With Brianna, she began to walk towards the front door. When the garage finally opened,
Come on, lady, let's go inside. This ain't no game, lady. Let's go. I ain't playing with you. Let's go. Come on, move it. Move it. Let's go. Come on. Upstairs, lady. Let's go. Let's go.
the man forced Brenda into the bedroom where her husband was being held by the other two intruders.
Look, lady. Cooperate. Nobody get hurt, okay?
The gunman stole money and credit cards from the frightened couple. But then the one who was clearly the leader announced he had really come for the Shaw's daughter, Amy, and the money at her bank. They would wait for her. The armed intruders held the Shaws for more than an hour.
Oh, lady, back. Sit down. Sit down.
At 7 p.m., the lead gunman ordered Brenda into the living room,
All right.
leaving one of his men to guard her husband and granddaughter. At the front window, they watched for Amy. They knew exactly when she was to arrive. For Amy Shaw, it was an ordinary Friday evening. The gunman ordered Brenda to the front door. Usually it was unlocked, so Amy was surprised she couldn't get in. She knew right away something was wrong.
Get over there. Get over there.
The leader grabbed Amy. He told her he had been watching them for some time. He knew their schedules, when they were vulnerable, everything. He began interrogating Amy about the security system at the bank.
And you have them? Do you have the code?
From her training, she knew it was best to comply with the demands.
Is it on the timer? Is the ball on the timer?
There's no time.
She said she could get him into the bank, but it took 2 codes to open the vault, and she only had 1.
You ready? All right, don't try anything funny. All right, turn around.
He said they'd deal with that when they got there, and warned her if anything went wrong, her family could get hurt.
Okay. All right. Okay,
The leader
set up.
announced he was taking Amy to the bank
Me and I are gonna go for a little ride.
and told his men to wait for his call.
You guys got everything under control. Any false moves, take care of it. Let's go. Come on. Come on. Sorry.
Her parents and little girl could only hope that she would not be harmed. As they left, the kidnapper removed his mask to avoid looking suspicious in public. At gunpoint, Amy drove across the Savannah River from South Carolina into Georgia and to the bank where she worked. The gunman ordered her to circle the bank slowly so he could check if a cleaning crew was inside. Pulling up next to the automated teller machine, Amy hoped to catch the kidnapper's image on its security camera. Deciding it was clear, he ordered her to drive to the back door. He told her that when they got inside, she was to explain all of her actions so he would know she wasn't setting off any alarms, and warned her again not to make any mistakes. Inside, she showed him the alarm she could disable. But as she had explained, she could not open the main vault door alone. She had one combination, but a co-worker had the other. The kidnapper reminded Amy that her family would remain safe only if he could get inside the vault.
Get to the phone.
At the Shaw residence, the intruders moved the family to the living room where they could watch the front. The Shaws hoped it would end peacefully, but the men seemed to grow agitated, their guns at the ready. The handgun had gone off accidentally. The intruders worried the sound had alerted neighbors. And their concern mounted as another car pulled up to the house.
Somebody's coming. Get over by the door.
It was Amy's brother-in-law and sister, and their young daughter arriving for a visit. They were taken as soon as they entered the house.
Let's go, lady. Come on. Come on. No, tie him up.
The gunman now had 6 hostages. At the bank, the lead assailant ordered Amy to call her co-worker for the second combination.
Hello? Hey, this is Amy.
When Amy asked, the co-worker hesitated, not understanding what was happening. Amy tried to explain that her family was being held hostage.
Get me the combination.
The gunman took over, threatening to come get the code himself.
Okay, just calm down.
Fearing for Amy's safety, the co-worker gave her the second combination. The gunman made sure the woman stayed on the line so she couldn't call police. Amy nervously punched in the second part of the combination. But the vault remained locked.
You gave me the wrong combination. Make it work or else.
She carefully tried again. And the door opened.
Get the phone.
The robber had Amy make sure the co-worker stayed on the line.
Which one of the dot packs?
And he ordered her to point out which bins held bait money that was sequentially numbered or rigged with exploding die packs. He left that cache alone. After the robber loaded up the money, he ordered Amy to call her parents' home on a second line.
Come on, get up and get the phone. Pick it up.
Hello?
The leader ordered his men to take care of things at the house, then leave and page him when they were clear.
And get out.
He took off with more than $86,000. Once he was gone, Amy set off the alarm to bring help. Then, frantic with worry, she called home. Her mother warned her not to call police. The armed men were still there. But it was too late. She already had.
Mom, don't hang up. Mom!
The gunman checked the terrified family's bindings. It seemed like they were going to leave. But one hesitated.
Look, I'm out of here, man. Let's go.
There were 6 witnesses to the crime.
Yo, come on, man. Let's go.
At 8 p.m., Richmond County Sheriff's officers responded to the bank in Georgia and learned the real crime was across the river. The lead investigator was Kenneth Booz.
We relayed all the information that we had to the Edgefield County Sheriff's Office and told them that there was a possibility that the family was still being held hostage.
Edgefield County, South Carolina Sheriff's investigator Don Bullock got the call.
We had a family hostage situation. Respond was code 1. That's everything you got, as fast as you can get there.
The family had called, saying the gunman had left, but the deputies had to be sure.
Sheriff's office, open up. Sir, step back.
The deputies checked the house for the intruders. They were gone.
They were safe. Nobody was hurt. Physically, they weren't hurt, but mentally, they had to be shattered. They really went through an ordeal.
The Shaws described the men as best they could. They never saw faces and knew only they were African-American males. The men were armed and aggressive.
Come on, man. Let's go. What you doing?
One had held a gun to Parker's head.
Look, I'm out of here, man. Let's go.
But the shot never came. When the assailants left, the family freed themselves and waited for police to arrive. Parker explained that the gunman took the keys to his son-in-law's car and described what they were wearing. Deputies put out an APB. As with any bank robbery, the Richmond County authorities notified the FBI. Special Agent Jerry Jones of the Augusta, Georgia resident agency arrived to interview Amy. She described the leader of the group and the direction in which he fled. She said she might have captured an image of him and told Special Agent Jones about the camera on the ATM.
She tried to get him into a position where the camera may take a photograph of him. As it turns out, the camera was activated only when one puts one's card into the machine, so that didn't work.
The cameras inside didn't catch him either. At the North Augusta crime scene, investigator Bullock arrived and was briefed on the search for evidence. Technicians from the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division had found oily shoe prints on the garage floor and photographed them for future comparison if suspects were located. From inside the house, technicians recovered a single cartridge from the bullet fired in the living room. It was from a .38 caliber handgun, but had no prints on it. Attempts to recover the assailant's fingerprints elsewhere failed as well, since they had worn gloves throughout the crime. At the top of the driveway, investigators located a vehicle stuck in a ditch.
The two suspects, when they left the house, they were going to take a car, and they got the key from the victims in the house. In their haste to back out of the driveway, they backed into a ditch and could not get the car out of the ditch, so they left on foot.
The technicians recovered foreign fingerprints from the vehicle. More evidence to compare to any later suspects. Nearby, they located several items they believed had been dropped by the fleeing gunman. There were several weapons, including a shotgun and a .357 Magnum. Clothes, masks, and gloves found in the bushes matched what the assailants reportedly had worn. Without the clothes, police didn't have much of a description of the suspects. They updated the already vague APB. 3 African-American males, 2 probably on foot, 1 in a dark blue sedan, armed and considered dangerous. In 1995, South Carolina and Georgia authorities sought 3 masked men who held the Shaw family hostage and robbed a bank. Within an hour of the 911 call, an off-duty deputy was en route to the Shaw house when he heard the revised APB. He spotted 2 men, roughly fitting the description, walking away from the neighborhood where the Shaws lived.
Hey guys, let me talk to you for just a second. Where you guys coming from?
The deputy questioned the pair, according to Sheriff's investigator Don Bullock.
They asked him what they were doing there, and they said, we were up at the church playing basketball, and they had no basketball and no transportation.
Backup soon arrived. The deputies knew the church mentioned had no lights on its basketball court.
And being that time of night, it was dark. The red flags just flew up. It was, he put 2 and 2 together.
If you don't mind, can we just take them back around the corner in your car since I don't have a cage? Come on, guys, we'll just clear you up real quick and that'll be nothing to it.
The young men agreed to go to a police staging area near the Shaw house for further questioning. They were identified as Daniel Evans and Lamarco Roscoe. At the bank, FBI Special Agent Jerry Jones received word of the 2 men in custody.
I elected to leave the bank because the victim teller was comfortable and secure. So I left the bank and went over to South Carolina to interview the 2 suspects.
Jones made it to the police staging area about the same time as the suspects. He and Sheriff's investigator Kenneth Booz knew that with more than one suspect involved, it was best to talk to them separately.
We separated them because most of the time they'll start breaking down, but they'll start wondering what the other suspect has told us. When they start realizing that the other one might be talking, then they want to be the first one to get on the bandwagon and start cooperating.
The men had been unable to give details about the church where they had allegedly been playing basketball. And investigators sensed they were involved in the crime. Special Agent Jones began with Lamarco Roscoe.
You develop a concept of what their greatest fear is, some weakness they may have in their past or their family or something of that sort. And in this particular case, it was fear of the death penalty that got Roscoe's attention.
Jones knew Amy Shaw was safe, but gambled that Roscoe did not. He told him his primary concern was Amy's safety.
I told him that he needed to know that if the third robber killed her, that he would face the electric chair for his complicity in the robbery. Well, everything I told him was the truth. My primary interest was the safety and welfare of the victim teller. And it is true that had the third robber killed Amy Shaw, they would both have faced the death penalty.
The suspect soon admitted his involvement in the crime. When asked for the name of the leader of the group, he said he only knew him by his first name, Chris, and believed his last name started with a J.
Another law enforcement officer who was familiar with a number of ne'er-do-wells in the Augusta area recognized the name and actually asked if that was in fact Christopher Jaburk, which he replied that it was.
Jones then interviewed the second suspect, Daniel Evans.
I told him that his accomplice had already confessed, and he immediately began to tell me the story of what happened that night. I wanted him to confirm the name of the third suspect without prompting, and he immediately gave up Christopher Jaburk by name.
In talking to Roscoe and Evans, investigators realized the two were obviously the followers, and Jaburk was in charge.
They weren't the masterminds of this bank robbery. They were, in my opinion, they were mastermind stooges. They didn't appear to have much knowledge of what was going on, except for they had been with Jaburk several times in the past few days, looking at different banks, coming up with different plans on how to pull this one off.
When he was finished with the preliminary interviews, Jones learned a pager number had been recovered from one of the suspects. He asked an officer to call the number. When the return call came back, the officer identified himself. The caller said his name was Chris Jaburk. When asked, he said he was 100 miles away in Mount Vernon, Georgia. Jaburk was defensive and asked the officer if he was being accused of something. Then he hung up. Investigators headed for Jaburk's house right away.
As it turns out, law enforcement was very familiar with Christopher Jaburk and knew where the residence was without any prompting.
If he was the lead kidnapper, he now knew police were looking for him. And with a head start and $86,000 in cash, Christopher Jaburk could be anywhere. In October 1995, authorities were seeking Christopher Jaburk, wanted for armed kidnapping and bank robbery. At the request of FBI agents and Richmond County deputies, Jaburk's mother called her son on his cell phone and advised him to come talk to authorities. Around 1 a.m., he arrived with his girlfriend. Although only 19 years old, Jaburk was already on a 5-year probation for burglary and escape from a detention center. The investigators took him in for questioning.
Yeah, we would just like to verify that, just the standard procedure.
His girlfriend agreed to come in too. At the sheriff's department, FBI Special Agent Jerry Jones questioned Jaburk about the kidnapping of the Shaw family and the bank robbery in Georgia.
I got a phone call from my girlfriend.
Jaburk admitted knowing the two confessed gunmen, Daniel Evans and Lamarco Roscoe, but denied any involvement in the crime.
And then?
He said he was in Mount Vernon, Georgia with his girlfriend and another female friend at the time in question.
Jaburk at first gave the two girls as his alibi, claiming to have gone with one of the girls to pick up the other girl and then come back to Augusta, Georgia, and stated that he was with the two girls the entire day, and even after they arrived back in Augusta, Georgia, they went to a movie together, all three of them.
Temporarily halting the interview, Jones went to talk to the girlfriend and the second friend who had come to the station at the request of investigators.
The two girls, when interviewed, declined to corroborate that alibi. The two girls don't back up the story.
Jaburk quickly tried to come up with a new alibi, according to Richmond County Sheriff's investigator Kenneth Booz.
He said that he couldn't tell us his whereabouts at the time of the robbery because he was involved in some other criminal activity. It was a drug deal in Atlanta, Georgia, according to him.
Two guys named Roscoe and Abe?
Jaburk's new story didn't convince anyone. Federal authorities charged him with 6 counts, including conspiracy, carjacking, kidnapping, and armed bank robbery.
After further interviews with Jaburk, he finally started cooperating and told us that he was involved in this robbery and kidnapping, and that he was actually the one that did it, but he wasn't the mastermind, that he was involved with some large-scale criminal organization, and that he couldn't reveal any more information because he was afraid for his family.
It was another obvious lie by a man desperately trying to protect himself. Jaburk's partners, Daniel Evans and Lamarco Roscoe, pleaded guilty to state charges of burglary, kidnapping, and armed robbery. They were sentenced to 30 years in prison. Christopher Jaburk was prosecuted by Assistant U.S. Attorney Richard Goolsby.
The only problem with this case was that there was no scientific evidence. It seemed like we hit a dead end every time we got a lab report as to any fingerprints or footprints. None of them matched Jaburk. But in terms of the quality of the evidence, we were very fortunate that the teller victim and her family members were just incredibly good witnesses. They helped win the case.
Jaburk was convicted on all 6 counts, which made him eligible for a sentence of life in prison without parole. While awaiting sentencing, Jaburk was held at a small county jail. There, he met another inmate. Jerome Frierson Bay, also a bank robber, was awaiting trial on 3 armed robberies. At the time, the jail was undergoing construction to expand the facility.
That's that one guard out that door.
There was plenty of time to plan an escape.
I think I see him right around noon or whatnot.
On March 27, 1996, a guard on routine patrol noticed an open door. A head count revealed 2 inmates were missing: Christopher Jaburk and Jerome Frierson Bay. Construction workers had seen 2 prisoners running toward a wooded area near the prison. Search teams combed the woods, but no one spotted the men. The search moved into the area's denser forest and swamps. And helicopters flew grid patterns overhead. Still, nothing. Authorities believe the pair might have had help on the outside. Police tried to seal the perimeter, putting up roadblocks to stop and check vehicles. But the two escapees were nowhere to be found. Jaburk's escape posed a danger to the Shaw family, who had testified at his trial.
We needed to contact the victim's family members and let them know about it, and to take other precautions that you would in a situation like this.
While the search continued, Edgefield County, South Carolina deputies began spot checks on the Shaw family to make sure they were safe.
I was convinced that at some point in time he would come back to the mother. We established a surveillance, 24-hour surveillance of the mother and the girlfriend.
Authorities watched, but Jaburk never showed. Then, FBI Special Agent Doug Fender developed a surprising lead.
Myself and other local law enforcement officials were conducting a separate auto theft investigation in the Augusta, Georgia area concerning the theft of a green Mitsubishi Eclipse. We were able to identify an individual in jail who indicated that he had transferred this stolen vehicle to one of the female associates of Jaburk.
Agents interviewed the young woman at the hotel where she worked. Initially, she denied any knowledge of the jailbreak, but Special Agent Fender tried to get her to cooperate.
This job is mainly about talking to people. When you put all the fancy forensic techniques and those sorts of things aside, probably the success of most agents is based upon their ability to solicit information from individuals and make them tell them something that they probably don't want to share with you.
When she realized she herself could go to jail, she admitted helping in the escape. She said that she and Jaburk's girlfriend delivered a stolen car to a parking lot near a wooded area by the prison.
After he escaped from the jail, he just got into the getaway car and made his escape with Frierson Bay. They, by prearrangement, went to a clandestine campsite which the girls had laid out for Jaburk and Frierson Bay with clothes and water and that type of thing.
The escapees easily found the stashed clothes, food, and weapons. They were free, but they needed money. The armed bank robbers knew exactly what to do. In 1996, escaped prisoners Christopher Jaburk and Jerome Frierson Bay fled a county jail in a stolen car. FBI Special Agent Jerry Jones was after them.
We began a search for the stolen vehicle, and we sent out an APB to all surrounding states regarding the description of the vehicle.
The day after the escape, a car matching that description pulled up to a bank in Lumberton, North Carolina, 220 miles northeast of the jail.
That's right, just take the money.
Two men in hats, gloves, and sunglasses robbed the bank at gunpoint. The employees knew to cooperate, so no one would get hurt.
Come on, man, let's go.
Lumberton police and North Carolina FBI agents responded to the scene. They determined $4,500 had been taken from the bank's vault. Security cameras were rolling during the robbery. The images were too blurry to make out faces, but the descriptions given by employees resembled Jaburk and Frierson Bay. And the car they left in matched the one the fugitives had.
I'll be there. Thanks.
The car was the best lead for Special Agent Doug Fender.
This vehicle we had entered into NCIC, and we discovered or was notified by the Lumberton police officials that that car had in fact been recovered in Lumberton, North Carolina.
An hour after that car was found, agents received a report of a home invasion and carjacking in Lumberton and went to interview the victims. The couple said they had been working on their car in the garage when two armed men burst in, demanding the keys to the car and a change of clothes. Then left as quickly as they had arrived. When shown a photo lineup, the couple positively identified Jaburk and Frierson Bay.
And that's the guy that came up on the left side. So we had a second vehicle, and we had an APB put out on that car. It was spotted in Raleigh, North Carolina. Jaburk and Frierson Bay robbed a bank there.
The fugitives were heading north, fast.
We knew that Frierson Bay had relatives in the New York, New Jersey area, so we suspected that to be the ultimate destination.
Tracking the pair became a matter of following a trail of bank robberies.
What we noticed was a trend of bank robberies that were occurring up and down the I-95 corridor. At the time we were tracking Frierson Bay and Jaburk, we suspected them in approximately 11 to 14 bank robberies up and down the East Coast.
In some of the robberies, men matching the description of one or both of the fugitives were captured on surveillance video.
We were able, through photographic surveillance and also witness identification, to establish that the two of them were together at least until they reached the Fredericksburg, Virginia area.
Agents focused their search in New Jersey, where Frierson Bay had family.
Based upon two tips that were called into a nationally televised program, Frierson Bay was tracked to a motel located in the Paterson, New Jersey area. A surveillance by members of the New Jersey FBI office was established. Once these agents were able to establish that Frierson Bay might be staying in the motel room, they remained on the premises.
If he were inside and armed, approaching the door would be dangerous. It was decided to wait him out. Soon they would learn the fugitive would not go down without a struggle. After two escaped prisoners committed a string of armed bank robberies, agents believed they had tracked one of them, Jerome Frierson Bay, to a New Jersey motel. After several hours, they spotted the fugitive. He went to his car as the SWAT team moved in.
Police, get out of the car! Get out of the car! We see your hands! Get out of the car!
He locked himself inside. But that wasn't going to stop them, according to FBI Special Agent Doug Fender.
After several commands by members of the FBI SWAT team, Frierson Bay still refused to come out of the vehicle, at which time one of the SWAT team members was able to break the glass with the butt of his MP5 submachine gun. Frierson Bay was then forcibly removed from the vehicle.
From his car, the SWAT team recovered a loaded .40 caliber Glock semi-automatic handgun, along with $1,500 in stolen cash. A search of the motel revealed no sign of his partner, Christopher Jaburk. Jerome Frierson Bay pleaded guilty to 10 bank robberies and was sentenced to 19 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. He claimed he had no idea where Jaburk was. Finding Christopher Jaburk remained a priority for Georgia FBI Special Agent Jerry Jones.
We believe that Jaburk and Frierson Bay parted company, and Jaburk began his journey back to Georgia. I always believed that Jaburk would come back home.
The FBI announced a $10,000 reward and had begun the process of adding him to their 10 most wanted fugitives list when a media report generated a promising lead.
Just a moment.
A caller said she believed the fugitive was staying with her minister in Atlanta, though the minister didn't know Jaburk was a criminal. The caller spotted Jaburk when she went to check on the minister's house after the elderly man entered the hospital with heart trouble. An arrest team staked out the residence, dressed as yard workers. On May 9th, 1996, a vehicle pulled into the minister's driveway. When the driver emerged, agents visually identified him.
What's going on?
It was Jaburk.
Finishing up the yard work for the old man?
The arrest team moved in.
Hands up, FBI! Hands up! Hands up! Hey, whoa, what's going on?
Surprised and cornered, Jaburk did not try to run. When they searched him, agents found $2,000 in his sock.
Hey! What's this? What is it? What's your hey for? What is this?
He was returned to jail, again to await sentencing for the Augusta kidnapping bank robbery.
When Jaburk was apprehended in Atlanta, we thought the pressure was off and everybody took a big sigh of relief and went home for a short period of time.
Jaburk was not giving up. Six weeks after his recapture, he once again broke out of his cell.
When Jaburk escaped and I received the telephone call, I responded to the jail to try to secure whatever evidence was there. We found a partial saw blade. When he got through the window of the jail, there's a huge double fence around the confinement area covered with concertina wire. So he had to get over that fence and over the concertina wire.
Agents searched the grounds and the fence topped with the razor-sharp wire. They recovered shreds of a prison uniform.
And we actually found traces of blood there, so we knew he was injured, but he was on foot.
They hoped he hadn't gotten far.
So we began to trail him through this rural wooded area, which also leads to a swampy area, probably around 10 square miles. We immediately brought in tracking dogs, which led us directly to the wooded area. So we knew the route of escape that he was trying to accomplish. As old as I was, out with the younger people going through the woods, and we tracked through there for days, for several days, without finding him. I then decided that we needed some electronic gear to try to trace him. So I contacted the Atomic Energy Commission site over in South Carolina, and they provided me with a helicopter equipped with an infrared system that's a heat-seeking system.
They searched dozens of square miles with a highly sensitive equipment. But somehow, Jaburk managed to avoid detection and was still on the run. 4 days later, an off-duty sheriff's deputy in nearby Appling, Georgia, thought he spotted the fugitive. The man was limping as if injured. The deputy called the station, and other officers spread out to search the area.
He was tracked into a wooded area right behind one of the grammar schools and apprehended.
Christopher Jaburk was again in custody. 2 weeks later, he was finally sentenced for robbing the Augusta Bank and kidnapping Amy Shaw and her family. Assistant U.S. Attorney Richard Goolsby fought to keep Jaburk off the streets forever.
Our role is to try to protect the community. That's one of our important responsibilities. So we were concerned and felt like that we should ask for the maximum in Jaburk's case. And fortunately, the court imposed the maximum, life in prison, plus 5 years.
Jaburk was ordered to serve his term at the federal prison in Leavenworth, Kansas. Without the possibility of parole, his only chance to be free again would be to escape. Several weeks into his sentence, Jaburk was caught trying to do exactly that by hanging on underneath a prison laundry truck.
Come on out now. Come on. Nice and slow.
I see you. Come on.
Nice and slow. Come on. Get out of there.
He had almost made it to the front gate. Jaburk was transferred to the maximum security federal penitentiary in Atlanta, Georgia.
Even if Harry Houdini was in the Atlanta federal pen, he wouldn't be able to get out, and Christopher Jaburk is no Harry Houdini.
No one doubts Jaburk will try again. But now, he is held in one of the most secure prisons in America.